Brandt DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brandt. Visit your local Brandt dealer for more information.
Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, pre-harvest edition, distributed under the Real Agriculture Media Network and powered by the Hebert Group of Companies. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we are going to keep this one pretty loose. No guests today. Sorry, Jeff, I don't consider you a guest anymore. So we figured we'd jump on here pre-harvest before things get a little crazy and do an operational one for the producers listening. We've done a lot of the professional ones, so I think it was time to get into some processes and some people. So I am going to start with an interesting question, though, and this one will be a little bit out of right field. So I got asked the question the other day, if you could actually sit down with any leader in history, who would it be and why? So I'm going to pick your brain, and that's a hard one off the start. So I'll leave Kristjan on this one, Jeff. You can have some thought process time.
Sounds good. I got to go first.
You got to go first. Any leader in history. Doesn't even have to be an ag leader, just any leader.
Theodore Roosevelt as president or John Wooden as the all-time leading basketball coach in history?
You got to give me a why.
Well, I mean, I think Wooden has more one-liners on how to build teams and how to build culture than maybe anybody in history, and a real focus on holding yourself accountable as part of a team. So I just read lots of his stuff, and I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's Roosevelt that did the man in the arena quote. And obviously kind of pre-social media, pre-being able to tell all these stories, was just able to rally troops and nations around a common goal. And that's kind of my belief, is that leaders are only good if they can make everybody else around them better people and better leaders. Otherwise, you're just selfish. So that'd be my picks.
Perfect. Jeff.
I'd like to interview Donald Trump, because I'd like to understand if there's a method to the madness or just madness.
Nice. I'm probably going to go back. I'm going to do a Rockefeller or somebody in that realm, just because, honestly, after reading some of the books I've read and some of the philosophies and whether they're good or bad, just some of the thought process around not only wealth, but multi-generational and conserving wealth and growth and companies. So I find that stuff a little bit interesting. So to tell you the truth, I'd like to pick some of the brains of some of the billionaires from the past. So, and that could apply to Buffett, to Munger, to any of them, right? Okay. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, I want to jump into a little bit of process, Jeff, and that's why I wanted you on for this one. Because obviously a COO of HGV, you're kind of the one I depend on to make sure that the crop gets in and out. Sorry, Hebes, I'm eliminating you from this now. So what does the preparation look like, Jeff? I mean, we're going into harvest. You just got done spraying, or we're finishing up spraying. What in your head is, what's going through your mind right now, and what are you trying to make sure is ready?
Well, I mean, obviously you gravitate towards the equipment, right? So, I mean, there's the physical aspect of getting the equipment ready. We spent the last few days on logistics. It's been top of mind, trying to figure out what we have for yields coming, where we're gonna logistically place everything. The staffing aspect of it has gone on since probably last January. That's kind of when we start doing our planning, and we've got a ongoing whiteboard that we're playing the chess games, shuffling people around in and out. So we discussed that as a group, especially with our management group, to make sure we're all on the same page. I'd say a lot of efforts going into technology right now. We've got Agromatics, we've got My John Deere. We've come a long ways. Kristjan can attest to this. When we were running the S series, I mean, we'd have 9-10 combines pulling the field, and and it was just a barrage of questions for half an hour till everybody got in the field. Now, I mean, we pull in the field, the boundaries are set, they accept the work order, and they go to work. So, I mean, there's a lot of work in the backstage that goes into having that prepped for all those guys. And the last one I'd say is probably a bit of mental preparation for everybody. I mean, everybody has that, they're anxious. They want to start harvest right now, right? So it's to get everybody's head in the game for the fall run.
Well, that's why I asked you on Monday how long Louie'd been walking fields. Okay. Okay, Hebe. So Jeff's taken over that role obviously over the last decade from you. What does your pre-harvest look like? Because obviously he's in charge of people, logistics. So what's the actual true CEO of HGV looking at right now on August or July 29th?
Yeah, I think 30% of my role is always forward looking. So I mean, watching next year's fertilizer markets, fuel markets, and grain markets for next year's crop already. I mean, 30% of it is probably still on this year's markets. And then the other 30% is I just get to have good conversations with the crew. So, I mean, Jeff kind of went through it, but things little like, as he works through logistics, I get to ask questions on why certain things based on contracts, but then some as simple as like, what if we do a 5 bushel change? So, I mean, Jeff says Jeff has his yields. He asked me what my gut feeling is. But then if we add 5 bushels to that across the farm, it's 28 more grain bags. Right. So it's those kind of questions that once they have their plans in place, I get to ask those. Right now, we still, with our capital plan, we always have, here's what we are going to do. And then here's kind of our wish list. And then there's always a couple pieces that are based on humans and crop size. Like we could squeeze by with 3 grain carts with our combine fleet if it's a below average yield. But there's no way if it's an above average. So I'm making a few capital plan things right now. And then same thing, our capital plan hinges on people a little bit. So we've got enough people around now to run 2 dirt crews this fall, which we normally haven't had, but we don't have the equipment to do it. So it's really just running kind of what if statements around the yield plan and the capital plan and the logistics plan, and then helping the guys, make decisions on kind of what I think the right plan of attack is based on that.
So how's that changed since 2017, Jeff? I mean, you joined HGV in 2017. Obviously, there's been a lot of change, not just in people, but obviously processes too. So give me the roundabout of how your position has changed over the last, let's call it 7, 8 years now, I guess.
I guess we talk about it a lot. I mean, in 2017, HGV was big, but it wasn't that big. And sometimes there wasn't enough decisions to go around. And, you guys have spoke about it lots. I mean, I think growth solves a lot of the issues, whereas now there's, at times too many decisions to go around. So I think, Kristjan, Louie, and I, and some of the managers, we each had to find our lane, and I think we're better up because of it, because we focus on our lane and not everything else.
So we had honestly, I came out of a meeting before I jumped on this podcast, and part of the meeting was going around the whole people and processes issues, and how a lot of your issues aren't actually people, even though they might feel like it. It comes down to process and having that in place. So when you're running into harvest, and I mean, I've talked about it before, I mean, let's call it 7 combines, 4 grain carts, 8 semis, couple spray, like when we start dealing with that kind of people and process management, what does a typical day look like, Jeff? Like when you wake up in the morning in the middle of harvest, what does your day essentially look like, and how do you keep all those things in line?
Well, probably it starts the night before, Evan, where we kind of do a planning. So I mean, that the main harvest crew itself isn't that bad to manage. I mean, this year we got 8 combine drivers, 4 cart drivers, 8 semi drivers. We got a kid at the auger. So I mean, there's 21 of the 30 people that we feed every night. So it's more so a little trickier keeping all the peripheral activities going, the sprayers, the floaters, the harrows, the dirt work, everything else, which is all very important. And so that takes a little bit. I mean, as a staff crew, I mean, I I'm not going to lie. I mean, I had to keep a sheet of foolscap next to there's a chair where I watch TV at night to make sure I had everybody accounted for. And the plan we set out the night before, I mean, that's where everybody starts for the day. That's not what you're going to do for the day. So, we've got people that live in different geographies. So we want them to carpool if they can. There's nothing worse than trying to move 30 cars at night to make sure everybody gets home. So just trying to manage the little things, right?
So why the night before and not the morning of? Like, I would say the majority of producers probably wake up, they get out to the field, they sit down, have their coffee with their crew and figure it out. So why did we choose the night before? And it's a loaded question. I know the answer. I just want to hear it out of your mouth.
We don't meet at a central location, and lots of teams meet at the shop for coffee. We don't do that. I mean, we grab our coffee and we talk on the way, and so we want everybody to know the direction they're heading, because I mean, the harvest crew may be heading to Whitewood, but the spray crew might be going to Ryerson. So, just and the guys want to know. I mean, they want to know at 5 or 6 at night the night before, but we just can't. We can't answer that till 9 or 10 usually.
I think he's being too nice. We did the math on what that hour in the morning cost us, and it.
Let's be honest. Asshole Kristjan comes out if he walks up to 30 people standing around. My ADHD does not handle it well. Neither does Jeff's.
No.
But I also don't think people want to show up and ask what they have to do. They want to know, right? But I mean, Jeff and I talk about this all the time. Seeding and harvest is like the easiest of managing people, because 90% of them know exactly what they're doing, and you set your processes up that they don't change. I literally had a neighbor phone me about this on my way home this morning to do this, and they just got to 5 combines. They're trying to do it with a big cart, a little cart, and they're saying it's chaos on the radio, and grain cart drivers are mad at each other, and we're just like we're going to go to 8 combines, so we'll run 2 packs of 4. We don't like any more than a pack of 6. We have 50-foot headers, so we need 2 carts for every 2 combines. If we had 45-foot headers, we wouldn't. And there's a combine leader and a combine follower on each of the 4 packs, right? We have agromatics in the carts and the combine, so that you know exactly which combine and cart has what on it, so that when you empty out, you go to the one that's the fullest. We show up at 8 o'clock, we service, we start combining at 9, and we quit at 9. It's just, you process as much as you can to take the emotion and the stress out of it and just turn it into a process that you just do your job, and everybody does their little piece in the big engine. And it's amazing how smooth it can run. Like, the worst thing actually is this, probably last week, this week, and next week, right, Jeff? When we finish fungiciding, and I mean, when Jeff and I went golfing this morning, it was our morning off. And like, when we left the farm yesterday, we had guys pulling up rock pickers and hard surfacing the rock pickers. Like, that you're getting pretty close to ready for harvest when Jeff is handing out hard surfacing rock picker dips to keep guys busy right now, right? So it's that when everybody isn't quite as busy that I find the people are tougher, and Jeff can probably comment on that more than me.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday morning I had to physically go to write a list on the whiteboard, because, I mean, you show up in the morning, and if you don't have a plan for the next day, then you've got 15 people standing there looking at you, and the burn rate's high. So, I mean, you still want to be productive, and, quite honestly, we've been encouraging some people to take some time off and enjoy a bit of summer before the rush starts.
So with the amount of changeover on tech and obviously just equipment in general, how do you have a full fleet of guys that's trained up, and is there managers that are in charge of that, or who's in charge of the field ops? I mean, when you're dealing with this kind of people and process, how do you make sure that everybody that's in a machine knows what they're doing from day one and not day 7 once all the nicks and crannies are out?
Yeah, I mean, for lack of a better term, we just want to try and use technology to idiot-proof things, right? I mean, we've got a lead. It used to be our lead combine driver and the last combine driver, which was usually Louis, Kristjan's dad, and they kind of they dealt with the settings, and Josh dealt with the paths of the combines we're going to follow, and basically the other guy's job was to keep their auger out, right, so that the grain cart could get them. So we're trying to use technology the best we can to automate everything and take some of the human error out of things.
But yeah, we've put right shout. I mean, Josh is the one you mentioned. Josh is our tech manager. I just be guessing right now. To be honest, I've kind of put in a time tracking thing for all the managers because some of them might not like it because they probably think I'm checking up on them. But you and Jeff have had me do this to you. Yeah, part of it is checking up on you, and part of it is though is as the farm grows, I don't actually know how long each thing takes. Right, I haven't had to do field boundaries since we were 7,000 acres. So I don't know how long field boundaries take, right? And I don't know how long doing the logistics plan takes because that's on Jeff's plate. So some of it is for me to better understand that. But I'd say 30% of his time is making sure the technology is all set up perfectly in the implements. I think a lot of technology problems for people is when they fire up seeding or spraying or harvest, is they're spending a lot of time setting it up and then trying to use it, where ours is all preloaded in all of the implements. When you pull into a field, 99% of it is accurate already. We'll send 4 or 5 guys into the South Country Combine Clinic this week, and then Pattison actually comes out and does a combine clinic for us on farm for people to get them caught up. Josh is really good at the tech, but Chad, we have 3 or 4 other operators, Chad, Dustin, a couple of the young guys that are really good on the monitors too. So, like Chad and Dustin, or Chad and Josh split the seeder shift, and one of them's always on, so that you always have, the crews always have somebody to call about technology. And that's what I find is that they just have to know who to call when they have a technology problem, and that 90% of the time that question can be answered and then everybody will use it.
So has that been the biggest shift in, let's call it, the last decade? Is it went from fixing tires and changing, concaves to essentially just dealing with the monitors?
Yeah, it's still part of it. I mean, you still need the machinery serviced and ready to go. But I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes work, the backstage that's got to happen for things to run smoothly.
I think that, the proactively being ready when it comes to maintenance, and then your, tires, et cetera, is still there just like it always was. I think that the technology thing has allowed us to optimize our capital utilization. So if you're going to spend $1 million on a combine, it better be doing as much as it can every hour. And if the technology is not being used, it's not, right? I mean, everybody knows this on GPS and auto steer, but I mean, machine sync on our crane carts, and then Harvest Smart. I mean, we did manual tests. This is like 7-8 years ago when it first came out, and like it was doing 13 acres a day more than our best drivers trying to do their best. It is really good tech. You just have to take some time those first few days to get it dialed in, and take some time to check on it. But it's kind of a no-brainer in our opinion.
So then we've always talked about it. I mean, coming from the book, I mean, the triangle, essentially the extraordinary leaders triangle. I forget what it's called, Hebes. But when we talk about trust and commitment and all those things, when you guys aren't in the field, how do you get over that? How do you trust your team is going to drop pans or calibrate combines? Or because I mean, that's one of the biggest holdups. I have a lot of my producers that we work with. That's one of the biggest holdups, is that they still believe they got to be in the field to make sure that everything's done correctly. And I know, managing that many people, Jeff, you're not in the field every single minute of the day, and Hebes, I know you're not. So what's the process of getting to the point where you can just know that it's getting done with the most optimization and efficiency?
Well, there really is only one answer: have too many people, right? So like when I hired Jeff, we had too many people, and Jeff and I knew that, but the only way for Jeff to spend a whole bunch of time with me and a whole bunch of time with Louis was for us to have kind of a half a person too much. And then when it came, his background is in grain and elevators way more than mine. He was already better at that part than Louis and I were. We just kind of had to get him up to speed on the combines to that point, right? And then I used last year, Chad spent a lot of time with me throwing pans and checking the backs of combines. And so then they spent like their 80% of the time there, they just actually need to spend time with you. No different than when you're training somebody to get their learner's license in a car or get their license. You have to spend time driving with people. So I find most of it is the inability to delegate, or the problem with trust, is usually because you're understaffed. So you and the person you're training have 120% on your plate already, and then you're trying to teach each other. You got to get to the point where you have 90% of the day on your plate, and you got 10 or 20% of time to just do it together for a few days. And then what I find is that once I can trust, like that person tends to have more time than I do anyway. So they do a better job of it. Right. And you have to have open communication, right? It's no different than when you're a parent. Do you want your kid to come tell you what they did wrong because they know you're going to listen and help them solve the problem and then learn about it? Or are you going to be the one that screams at them so they're scared to tell you what they did wrong? Right? You have to have that learning environment. And in my opinion, kind of that one mistake, shame on me, I didn't train you good enough. Second mistake, shame on you, you didn't listen. Right? But that first mistake, that's a me problem and a process problem, whoever the trainer, not the trainee, right?
Let's pause the truth about ag to go into financial acumen. We are facing high cost of production, volatile markets. Come work with Maverick Ag. Why would you come work with Maverick Ag, Gibbs?
I'm a big believer in doing what you're good at. And so if you don't want to spend time in the details specifically of your financial management and financial acumen, then you're better off to partner with somebody. Run your farm, grow your crop, raise your animals, whatever your specialty is, and have a high level knowledge of the financial side. But let somebody work with you to get into the details and let you know when debt service is getting close to offside, what your cash flow is doing, and what months you're going to be tight so that you can run the farm the way you want to be, as perfect as possible.
If you want someone to help you deal with the banking regime or look at your next equipment deal, reach out to Maverick Ag. That's maverickag.com. And I think that's a hard concept for a lot to swallow, right? Like usually the first issue is you go to the person when actually it's probably processed in 95% of the realms, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you answered a bit of my question, but when I jump into it, like everybody calls, let's call it harvest, seeding, whatever, organized chaos, right? You get in, the pressure's on, you want it done in the 40 days or the 21 days or whatever your goal is. How do you balance the speed, the quality, the safety? Like you got a big staff, Jeff. How do you pull the reins back and make sure that everything's getting done to that best of their ability rather than just to get it done?
Well, I think it goes back to the culture we've built and the managers we've had in place, because I mean, the simple fact is you're not going to ride in the buddy seat with everybody. You're not going to ride in the service truck. You can't do it all yourself. So our main job as leaders is to drive that culture, and then the managers drive it down. So I mean, those managers, there's always one on staff at any given time, and they're helping drive that culture. And we've got that faith in their abilities, right? Because they're going to do it the way we did.
Well, and I think that's the interesting part is when we start talking in Farmer Coach or any of the consulting we do, when we talk about the EOS process and we talk about driving it down and communication, all that stuff, it's almost like a foreign concept of why do you believe in this or why do you trust this? And part of it is we've seen it work. And I think this would be one of those examples, right? Is that we started, we didn't know who was going to kind of be your successor, to be fair, Jeff. And then we got a few guys who are actually trying to push you out, let's call it. So I think the proof's in the due diligence and the concept, right? So
I think too, when you're doing your management teams, it's ensuring that you have a bit of a teeter-totter effect, right? If you're all of your managers are 100% focused on productivity and nobody's focused on perfect, then you're going to start pushing the ball too hard and throwing grain out the back and making guys work 16 hours. But if everybody's focused on perfect and not on productivity, you don't get enough done. So I think it's important when you're building any team to have different personalities and different skill sets in that management group to hold each other accountable and see the big picture. And then as you start growing them, like you said, obviously, as we grow, someone will like Jeff's job, but make sure they like it for the right reason. Make sure they like it for managing big groups of people. Because if you're a manager that likes managing small groups of people at a high productivity, knock things off the check mark every day, you probably don't want Jeff's job, right? So it's just really trying to get people in the right seats and maximize their output as well as their job satisfaction, because those two things are what end up hitting the bottom line.
Yeah, I don't want Jeff's job.
No, but you're aware of that.
You touched on it earlier too. I mean, the biggest change, not a change, but is when good people come along, we hire them and then we figure it out. And by having extra people, there's guys throwing pans, there's guys, doing their due diligence on the dryer. It just, everything gets looked at a little closer.
Well, it was the for me shout, right? So, this is my second year not running a drill. I'm the rover. I think I maybe seeded 400 or 500 acres this year, right? So I end up being the spare. Now this harvest, we had to kind of put somebody else back in a combine to run the second combine crew. Then we automatically jaded to Chad, but Chad kind of likes managing crews and people. And so they had a meeting without me there. And Chad basically said, like, are we just putting me in there as a crutch? Because long term, we probably don't want me in there. And so they've kind of started to move Chad out of a combine too, to help Jeff with more of the logistics stuff, right? Which is where he's going to have to be. So it's that. I think one key lesson is don't always hit the easy button. So our first easy button is every time we were short an air seeder driver was put Kristjan back in. I'd run the most air seeders, right? I had the most acres under my belt, more than Chad, more than Josh, more than Louie, everybody. But the minute you hit the easy button, you quit training. So this year we could have hit the easy button, and instead we put young guy Jaden Bender in there, and he split a shift with Josh, and Jaden had a great year, and he loves it. But you have to hit the right button, not the easy button. And that's not always the most simplest decision to make, but I think it's super important.
Well, and I think part of it wasn't just Jaden out there by himself at midnight. Like you had a team around him. You had someone who was the lead operator. Like he got put into a circumstance to be successful, not to fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for guys to hear a bit. So we talk about the harvest hangover quite a bit. So let's talk about in season. How do you keep the morale of the team up? I mean, like I said, we've combined in December, we've combined late, we've had great years. So how do you keep that morale moving throughout the whole season, especially when you get those long, let's call it 2 or 3 weeks where you just go, go, go?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about it the other day, and there's kind of 3 splits to the busy season. You know, when you come out of the gate, everybody's amped up and call it the Superman phase, and nobody can work as hard as them. And you watch people, you know, they're getting out of the pickup truck and they're running to the semi and they're jumping up and doing tarts and that. And then, you know, Louis Kristjan's dad, he has a saying, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you got to find your pace, right? So, you know, everybody comes out of the gate rushing, call it the first couple weeks, 10 days. Then if history serves itself, there's usually a blowout between the half. And then the come to Jesus, then everybody settles in for the next 3 weeks. And then the last week, people are just hanging on, right? And then that's where you see, you know, people starting to help each other. So, I mean, the biggest thing is our managers, and for us, I mean, we need to keep our disposition in check and lead by example, right? Have those conversations, you know, drive the point home that you know, we're in week 6. How can you make somebody's day better? So.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 key points, right? Is the first 3 or 4 days are easy. Everybody's amped up. But after that, I mean, Jeff and I have to stay as steady as we can, but we need everybody has to have their day where they're kind of the crew leader. And what I mean by that is the positive person on the crew and making sure everybody's focused on the right things. And then I think the number one question in any crew that is going to put in long hours for a long period of time is every time you're walking up to a situation, the first thing that comes to your mind should be, how can I help? If you walk up to every situation, whether it's really good or really bad, and the first thing out of your mouth is, how can I help? I can promise you every day is going to be a good day. The minute you go up there to try and tell them that if you were driving it, that wouldn't have happened, or I'm amazing, or it was the rock's fault, it just pisses somebody off. But if you can walk up to every situation and be like, hey, how can I help? I promise you it makes every day a pretty good day.
So going into that, what would you say, how would you evaluate success? Like, let's say we're post-harvest right now. What's your definition of success for the next, let's call it, month and a half, Jeff?
You know, obviously our goal is to be done in 40 days. So if we could get done in 40 days is the biggest one. And, you know, everybody still has some life in them at the end of the run, because that means we've managed our time and our resources correctly, I guess, is how I would define success. And obviously some grain in the bin.
Hebes?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a marriage, right? end it if everybody can be happy and healthy by the time we're done. So we don't want any situations that puts anybody at a safety risk. We want processes to be followed so a big crop can end up in the bin, and in a perfect world have a bit of luck that a whole bunch of it ends up in the elevator at the same time, because everybody agrees you can get more work done in harvest than you can ever. And really it just ends up being a piece to set us up for next year, right? The big crop helps set up cash flow, doing a good job of each field, sets up the air seeders, and the fall crews coming through, whether that be for dirt work and floating, sets us up to be more efficient. So it's just, I try not to look at it like Mount Everest. It's just another cycle of the year in our career that we have to go through and follow the process and make sure you, like I said, ask everybody how you can help every day. And I think you can come out of it pretty good.
So obviously with that many different roles, I mean, and I feel like I'm just asking question after question, guys, but that's what I'm going to do here. So I think some of the listeners just want to hear, I mean, how do you manage the roles and responsibilities and team structure, Jeff? I mean, how, like, you obviously we said we had the 4 managers, but when you're in the heat of harvest, how are those guys operating? I mean, give me the low and dirty of how do those guys function throughout the whole harvest season, and how does that fall down and driven down to the rest of the team?
I'd say, first thing I'd say, we're very fortunate to have a variety of people with a variety of skills. So, I mean, that helps us manage some of the workload. I mean, we've got one guy that kind of looks after our R&M, and he's got a few people that work with him to make sure everything's running. We've got, one guy that manages our tech. He keeps everybody going on the tech front. We've got a guy that manages all our peripheral activities. So, I mean, the sprayers, the dirt work, the harrows, everything else keeps going. And, another guy that looks after logistics and the dryer. So, I mean, it's kind of divide and conquer approach. And again, we know our lane and we stay in it.
But I think too, is everybody understanding that there's 4 managers, and depending on the time of the year, you're going to have more say, but you still need to step up. So I'll use Dustin's a good example in harvest, right? He ends up being in a combine, but typically he's taking care of big projects. He just finished a couple big, huge yard renovations where we're moving liquid tanks and setting up pads, and he'll go into a combine. But the minute, say, Josh's combine or another lead combine breaks down, he just gets out of his, gives it to him, and goes and fixes the other one with Travis, right? Like he falls into that. His role is to keep the lead combine going, which sometimes means he runs his combine right behind it all day, and sometimes means he gets out. So I think it's that mentality of all the people, and especially our managers, that it's kind of like a hockey team. It all depends on the situation, on who's the key manager at that time. And if you're not the one that has to make that decision, then your job's to enable and help the person that is making the decision. And that could just make everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned that size fixes a lot of this. So I want to pull this back a little bit. Obviously, we're talking about a large farm team, large consolidated farm. Let's go back a decade or 15 years, Hebes. Tell me some of the advice that you'd give those family farms that are, that 3,000 to 7,000 acres, and they're trying to move forward and progress. And obviously you got the family dynamics, and you got the stepping on each other's toes on the roles and stuff. What's the best advice each of you could actually give to some of these to make it work better in their current circumstance before the growth, or maybe they don't want to grow, or what's the best way to move?
Yeah, probably my top 2 pieces of advice would be, 1, know your equipment multiple. That helps you drive your efficiencies based on, so how many acres can your combine get or your seeder get in your area? And number 2, treat everybody on your team like they don't have your last name. Yeah. Roles and responsibilities are not defined by last names. They're defined by skill sets and passion and grit. And the worst thing you can do is treat someone different at work because they have your last name. They can be treated different when it comes to the dividend and the profit. They can't be treated different when it comes to their labor number and their job, or it will cause more trouble than anything else I've ever seen on a farm.
So theoretically, are you saying that the CEO could be a non-family member?
100%.
Ooh.
A CEO could be a non-family member. I also think you could have I'll use one of my kids. What if my son wants to be my lead mechanic, and we got 4 or 5 guys working under him at that time, and he doesn't want the CEO job? He also could at the end of the day, he could be the most highly compensated mechanic in South Saskatchewan because he might make whatever, $100,000 to be a mechanic. But he also might get a dividend for his 28% of the profits off the whole farm at the end of the year. That doesn't mean ownership and your job are not the same thing, right?
And I loaded that up because I've got, theoretically right now, Maverick is working on 3 farms, all of which who are trying to either replace themselves as CEO, even though they've got kids in the organization, or they essentially want to retire, but they don't want to sell the farm. So they're looking at non-family ownership, right?
I also think the other thing you need to look at in a lot of cases is we've also seen a lot of farms where the younger generation is completely ready and probably has a better skill set to be the CEO, and the older generation is probably more of a COO or project manager.
So get me this roadmap because this one ought to be good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I would start with our ABC task list where write down for me for a week or a quarter or a year what your favorite things to do are. Right? What do you love doing? Feels like I wouldn't even have to get paid for it. What do you like doing? I don't mind doing it. And what do you hate doing? And our goal is that 80% of what you do in a day is love and like. And if you're, if you're a 65-year-old father and you're the current CEO and 80% of what you're doing is in the hate column because you don't like dealing with lawyers and accountants and bankers and making marketing decisions, then I would argue it's maybe not time to retire. It's time to take on a different role. Right. And that, there's lots of days I see Louis happier, my dad happier now than I've ever seen him because his role is what he loves doing. Like he likes helping other people on the team be productive. He'll put more kilometers on his truck going to pick up this in Estevan or a header in Russell. And because he knows that it keeps 3 other people busy that week. And he loves that. And he loves the land stuff. And so it's just, I think it's really important for teams to look at what you love doing and like doing and try and get people in the right seats on the bus, not just based on last name.
Okay, this is going to be good because I'm going to throw this one at Jeff. And okay, as a leader, non-family, how do you deal with conflict when Kristjan or Louis or maybe Kristjan's kids in the future, there's a conflict between the two? How do you manage that? Because that's probably the biggest pushback I get from some of the non-family employees is how do you manage a family farm and the family dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it was all sunshine and lollipop, and then it'd hard to get used to a little bit of awkward, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, we all had that mutual respect, and no matter what, we're all pulling in the same direction. So, I mean, it takes everybody a little bit of time to find their footing and get that confidence, but we built that mutual respect, so we could have those awkward conversations and then move on, right?
I think too, like most situations where I've seen the non-family member in a really bad spot is when the key family member, whoever's the leader at the time, I don't care which generation, is unwilling to have awkward conversations and deal with conflict. Because I don't care who you are, it's the CEO's job to do that. And if you can't do that, then it's going to be super hard for a non-family member to excel in their role. Because if you won't deal with it yourself inside the business, then how can they, right? Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
I even look back to when the 3 of us started working together, Evan. It took you a little while to get used to the way we talk to each other.
You still piss me off all the time. Don't be like that.
I know, it's like a game.
So I'm going to dig a little deeper. So funny, 3 days ago, Hebes, I think you were driving home from Ball and you stopped in one of the yards and you paid, honestly, it was just a simple comment to the team that had cleaned up the yard. And it was just a quick boxer. And one of our new hires reached out to me. He's like, I can't believe how simple that was for him to send that out. And yet I never see that happen from leadership. Right. So what, I guess from your role, your position, what have you learned on that side of it of good performance and, reviews and how do you reward those? And does that little Voxer saying good job, does that go a long ways? Like, you tell me.
Well, I mean, most of that stuff, the guys that talk to Jeff about it more than me, but my big thing is, we set up profit shares for key people on the team because I don't necessarily want to single out individual projects or people when it comes to full rewards, right? I want it to be a big team thing. However, what I find is in a farm, it's super easy for people to get hyper focused on the seeders and the combines. And if you drive one of them and if that does a good job, you're important. So and worked in my mind, that's just an expectation, right? I find it super important to point out the other stuff and how having yards clean and the lawns mowed is important and the grain bags cleaned up and reminding everybody that, how important it is for our trucks to go through for safeties because we have 2,000 loads of grain to go through a year. So I'd say I probably try to really notice those other projects and other items and point out how it was a good job because everybody needs to understand how important every little piece of that is to the whole operation. And that if those little pieces don't get done, the big parts don't get done. And then secondly, I also try to point out anytime I hear positive comments from lower team members about higher team members. So, I don't know the number one way to decide if you're a manager is if people like to work for you. I'm not saying they have to like you, right? Because you still might be hard on them and that's your way of being fair. But they have to like working for you because you get a lot of stuff done and they feel that they're respected. That doesn't mean you have to be a pushover. But you're not real useful as a manager. People don't like working for you or like working with you, right? So I try to really focus on that stuff and make comments. And then my last piece would be kind of within the managers, right? Is obviously Jeff and I'll always get talks back and forth and no different, if you two bring me something, then it's kind of like being the chair of a board. I don't believe the chair of a board should have to break a split vote. I think you should push it back to the table and make people figure it out like big kids. And so a lot of my advice is, we're not in grade 9 anymore. Maybe you two should go for a drive and talk. I'm not sure why I'm getting involved with this because you're bringing it to me because you don't want to deal with awkward. And I can make the decision, but that doesn't fix awkward, right? So it's pushing back on people to just go communicate with that person that you're having some struggles with. And I'll guarantee 9 times out of 10, you'll figure it out. It's not as easy as sending a text or a Snapchat like everybody thinks it is in this world.
Going to pull you away from the podcast here to go into Farmer Coach. We have opened up the registration for November. Brand new courses, the executive, the foundations. Hebes, why would you come to Farmer Coach?
Yeah, I think 2 quick points. The first one is just a baseline knowledge around farm management, right? From accrual statements and debt service ratios to human resource policies that we've seen work on operations and businesses kind of around the world. And secondly is just knowledgeable peers. It's not just what you learn, from the coach and being in the program. It's what you learn discussing with 10, 15, 20, 25 other operations and what's worked and not worked on their operations. And I think those 2 pieces are pretty invaluable.
With more than 90 producers having gone through the course, you have an online platform. It is probably one of your largest peer groups you can be a part of. So sign up, go to farmercoach.ca, and we'll see you in November. Yeah. And I think it goes back to the friend or friendly, not friends, right? And I think, Jeff, I phoned you multiple times throughout the year on HR stuff because I'm self-aware that's not my strong point. But it is as a leader, there's a difference between being liked and respected and being their friend, right?
Yeah. You can't always be the boss and the buddy, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think Jeff too, right? We've talked about this lots. Jeff's starting to see it now, but he'd remind me more before is that I can always say everything that comes to my mind that's positive. I can't always say everything that comes to my mind that's constructive because even though I have no trouble dealing with awkward with anybody. And so I just want to deal with things right now because I don't think I target a person very often. I'm targeting a process. Like, what is the underlying reason that this happened? Yeah. But when you're the one writing the check, if you deal with awkward live, sometimes people feel that their job's in jeopardy where that's not even crossing my mind. Like if your job was in jeopardy, you would know if you're talking to me.
He does have a filter. He does have a filter.
I've learned to take a deep breath anyway.
So each of you, give me one of the lessons you learned the hard way in agriculture or just in your job descriptions. Jeff, you've been with Viterra and then you came here. What's one of the lessons you learned the hard way?
If you're not going to delegate things, you're going to burn yourself out, and you're not going to have any fun, whether it's agriculture or it's anything you do. If growth is your plan, and you want to make sure you have fun doing it, and so have a plan to manage your personal and your business life. We like to harbor all the decisions to make ourselves feel important. You're just on the path to burnout. Yeah.
Hebes, your nervous twitch. Quit clicking the pen and give me your hard learning lesson in agriculture.
Yeah, you know what? There's probably two. One kind of professional and one personal. My first one, the professional one, would be 80% of the world, maybe more than that, I think, would like to know what 80% of their day looks like.
Yep.
So have processes and roles in place that people know what's going on and know what they're going to do 80% of the time, and get 20% variation for some excitement, which was hard for me because I'm probably the other way. Like I don't function very well if I know exactly what's going on all the time. Secondly would be the quality versus quantity time argument that entrepreneurs use with their kids is an absolute crock of shit that somebody made up to make themselves feel good. And I fell heavily into that early in my career. I had a wife that supported me tons, but you know, my daughter appreciates me reading a book with her at night as much as she does, making sure I'm at every ball game. And so just remember to do both. And that if you need a reason in the morning to have better processes and hire better people, just go look in your kids' bedrooms before you leave. And if that doesn't make you try and get better, then you got a problem.
Well said. Okay, so last big question here, and then I want to jump into some of the industry stuff before we leave. But so when most of your day, Hebes, and I know as Maverick grows, I'm having the same thing. Most of my day is spent looking longer than 1 year out. Let's call it 3, 5, 10. And Jeff, same as yours. I mean, when it comes to the HR side of planning the next expansion, that stuff. How do you get the team ready for that kind of success, or how do you get the buy-in from them when you sell the vision of this is where we're going, and either they say yay or they say nay? So how do you get the buy-in?
I think they're more excited by the growth than anybody. And I mean, I think they help drive it. I mean, we talk lots to them about, and I'll use the shop for an example, is if you don't want to be the guy pulling wrenches and you want to be managing 5, 6 mechanics, ordering parts and whatnot, then we need to grow, right? Because that gets you where you need to be. So we talk about that all the time.
Yeah, I don't really have a rhyme or reason, because I mean, my theory has always been that if you're not growing, you're dying, and that growth can fix most problems if you have processes in place. So, I mean, I think I selfishly tried to pick people that wanted to grow and grow themselves and grow the business and be part of that type of a culture. Like I said, we try to treat it like a game, and that we're here to win, and we're addicted to that game. And so, I think selfishly we kind of picked the team that they look forward to that part, right? They don't look forward to stagnation. And so that, I think that's partly why we can get them to follow, is they've been picked to be that type of person that's excited by that stuff.
Okay, last kick at the can here. So let's jump into some headlines in agriculture just to finish this off. So obviously, big news this week from Saskatchewan, at least, was that we are going to sign off on the agri-stability changes that were, I guess, pre-election. Thoughts, Hebes? What do you see coming out of the $6 million cap and the 90% contribution?
They go to 90 or 80?
They went to 90. They were at 80.
I think it's about goddamn time on the cap, is what I'm going to say, and it shouldn't be just at 6 million. It should be at a per acre amount based on your acres. That's my one there. And that, even if you go back, there's been some articles out of Ottawa already showing that when the cap was put in place, what cost of production was then a reference margin then compared to now. That's where they came up with the 6 million. I argue it should probably be bigger. It should be by the acre. I'm less excited. I mean, the 90% is obviously awesome for us. I mean, why would I get mad at free insurance? So but the cap, I think, is an astronomical deal. I think the bigger payout is less of a big deal because you could wrap around it with other products, etc. But I'm also, I have a hard time saying no to free insurance, but at the same time, I also have a hard time looking taxpayers in the face and saying it was a great idea.
So what's your reply to the pushback that agreeing to the 6 million cap, that's just working for Consolidated Farms? And to be fair, I think Producer had an article 2 weeks ago that even crop insurance and stuff should be more expensive the bigger you get.
Well, number one, there is no cap in crop insurance, so that argument kind of goes to hell on why you should have a cap in agri-stability. Number two, I think crop insurance should be more expensive for those people that aren't actuarial sound. So the way the insurance world works is if you took 100 years of premiums and 100 years of payouts, it should end up at zero. And so those people that get paid out way more than they pay in on a 100-year average should pay the most for insurance. What does insurance have to do with size? If you have a $10,000 or if you have $100,000 house compared to $1 million house, you still calculate it as a percent of total value and replacement value. So I just don't understand why people come up with this size thing. Blows my mind.
I don't disagree. I'm throwing it out there because I know it's a question that's been front and center. Let's be fair.
Yeah. Well, and you want to know what? If their argument is should we or should we not subsidize crop insurance and agri-stability versus the size, I can have that argument. And if we can find ways, the reason the government doesn't insure your house is because lots of private companies do. So the only reason I'm a proponent for some government insurance in agriculture is because there isn't a whole bunch of private options, right?
Yeah, there's not enough.
I don't believe that size has anything to do with it. I do believe there needs to be some type of production insurance for agriculture. I'm not saying Canada's doing it right or wrong compared to the rest of the world.
Okay. Any other headlines to share before we call this one done?
So I'm waiting for the storm to start here. We just needed to. The 10 days before we start combining is that's probably my worst. Not being able to give the guys the day we're going to start. It frustrates me. If there was a technology to help with that a month before we were going to start, there was a real countdown, that it would make life easier.
Gotcha. Jeff, anything to add before we go?
No, that's good. Thanks, Evan.
Okay. So I guess watch for us at Harvest. We've got a couple of really good interviews coming here pre-harvest before things start. Obviously, this one's going to go out first, but I know we've got some of the FCC guys on, and we've got some BASF reps and some really higher, how do I say it, bigger industry leaders that we want to have on and hear their stories from where they started to where they got to. So please listen to us while you're sitting on the combine for X amount of hours for the next month and a half. And remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. And that's The Truth About Ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.